Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I'm Dorin. I'm heading investments in EMEA at NightDragon. I'll do a quick 30-second intro before I welcome the other panelists on stage. We're a USA-based VC. We're investing in national security, cyber, privacy, and safety technologies in the growth stages. We're founded by David DeWalt. He's a multi-time, multi-billion-dollar CEO. He's got 5 or 6 or maybe 7 of these exits under his belt, including McAfee that he sold to Intel for $8 billion, FireEye that he took public, Mandiant that was sold to Google for $5.5 billion, and others. Aside from being CEO of these companies or chairman, he's also vice chair of CISA and Homeland Security and board member of the National Security Telecommunications Council of the USA President. So he's been involved in defense tech for quite some time and works very, very closely both with the US government and governments all around the world. We have companies in our portfolio like Capella, Hawkeye 360, Data Miner, and most recently Saronic, which is autonomous maritime vessels, where we co-led that massive $175 million round with Andreessen Horowitz. So that's us. Having said that, I'm very excited to introduce the panelists. Alex, principal at Viola Ventures, Nimrod, founder and managing partner of Tau Ventures, and Naor, partner at Fresh Fund. We're going to do quick intros. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'll start. So I'm Alex, a principal at Viola Ventures. We're part of Viola Group. The group has been around since 2000, so almost 25 years. We have 4 different funds, different asset classes. Viola Ventures, that's us doing early stage, mostly seed and A. We have Viola Growth that are doing late stage. Viola FinTech, it's a vertical fund that focuses on FinTech mostly abroad. And we also have Viola Credit, which provides venture lending. So it's a wide array of funding solutions for innovation across the life cycle. At Viola Ventures, we mostly focus on seed and A, checks of up to $10 million as the entry point. And we're quite agnostic, so we focus basically on a wide array of sectors, from infrastructure, semiconductors, cyber to vertical AI, and etc. And most recently, we've started looking closely at defense tech opportunities in Israel. I joined the team about 2 years ago. Before that, I worked in consulting for about 10 years, mostly in Israel and Europe. A pleasure to be here.
Got it. Hi, guys. Before I'll start, I have to share with you that when we got in after lunch, it was like half empty, and it reminds me of a story that a couple of years ago, I was invited to this conference in Europe, and when I got on stage, I realized there is only one guy in the audience. So I was like, well, if it's just me and you, we don't need the slides, let's go and have a drink or something. And he was like, well, I'd love to, but I'm the next speaker. So, so I hope not all of you are speakers. Anyway, my name is Nimrod Cohen. I'm the founder and managing partner at Tau Ventures. Tau Ventures, Tel Aviv University Ventures, that's Tel Aviv University VC. So basically, we're a VC like any other VC. We raise $70 million from LPs, from investors from all over the world. We invest pre-seed and seed investments. Generalistic, basically. And the advantage of being part of a university, basically, as we see it, it gives us 2 main advantages. The first one is around deal flow. I guess you believe me that many great things going on around Tel Aviv University, so we have some kind of advantage in identifying those opportunities. And the second one is once we invest, we have the opportunity or the ability to offer our entrepreneurs the different resources around the university, from connections all over the world, connecting knowledge, workforce, and so on. And another uniqueness is being a VC of a university, which is a very unique positioning, allows us to do many things with the industry and create an entire ecosystem. And one of the leading activities that we're super proud of, and this is, I guess, one of the reasons why we're here, is the accelerator that we run together with the Israeli Shabak, the security agency, for like 6 years now, and 10 cohorts, focusing on dual use and defense. You can brand it any way you want. Super exciting to be here, and I'll let Naor introduce himself.
Thank you. Not a typical investor, 25 years the defense sector, Started to invest with the Fresh Fund 6 months ago. Fresh Fund is a generalistic fund, early stage, mainly between 300K to 1 million. Across verticals. We moved to defense a few years ago, but push it forward in the last 6 months. We did already 4 investments in defense tech startups, and I will talk after that about some of them.
Amazing. Can you hear me? Now? 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 Yes. Okay. So what are the major focus areas that your funds have in terms of what are the up-and-coming or maybe underfunded categories in dual use that you would prioritize these days?
So we do around. So we actually, so we look at it a bit differently. We actually look mostly at defense as a sector we're interested in. So there are like different ways to look at kind of the comparison between dual-use approach and kind of a focused approach. And we believe that in early stages, even though there are advantages to kind of having a broader focus and maybe shorter sales cycles and maybe a bigger market, we actually think that the size of the opportunity is so the changes that have happened in the past 4 years around the world actually requires focus mostly in defense. So that's maybe the first point. The second point is that in terms of categories, so the way we look at it is kind of compared to what are the relatively immediate needs of the end users, mostly tactical end users. So, it's kind of case by case, but broadly speaking, we would look at areas where civilian tech has an advantage over the military primes. So, for example, IT infrastructure, everything that has to do with communication protocols or basically efficiency of IT systems. The second thing is around kind of communication on a tactical level. And the third, which is, I guess it's obvious, but everything that has to do with AI, whether it's around autonomous vehicles or unmanned systems, but also kind of enhanced systems. So it can be around computer vision, it can be around data and insights. So I guess my point is we look at it in a broad way, but we want to have a clear end user that will provide us feedback during the due diligence process, and we will also like to see focus. So we're kind of on the defense first approach and not kind of dual use.
And when I turn to you two, Naor and Nimrod, I want to also touch on the fact that both of you are in touch all the time with the end customer because you have established the garage, you work with the garage and established the accelerator. So how does that influence which categories you would focus on? And also, how does it influence the diligence that you do and validating that that category is the up-and-coming category that you should be investing in?
Well, I think my answer will be relevant to any type of investment, but specifically for defense and dual-use companies. You always, especially as a pre-seed and seed investor, you always want to know what is missing in the market. You want to get some validation from the customer at the end of the day. And the fact, for example, each company that got accepted to the accelerator that we run, it's not because we at our venture thinks that the team is great or they have a great technology. There needs to be someone at the security agency, a technological champion that validates this technology and believes that it's worth a while for him to spend his time and to help this company, and that he believes that they can gain something out of it. And when we look at dual use, or honestly, I don't really believe in the term dual use, but let's use defense tech mostly. I think one of the main ways for us to understand if it's relevant for us to invest or not is the way of go-to-market and competition that we see in these markets, because they're a bit different than other markets. I mean, they are giants. Until recently, there is no way startup could have worked with governments or army or agencies and so on. So we're looking for those technologies that theoretically they can win the giants. If a startup comes to us that believes it can build the next airplane or helicopter or anything like that, well, maybe, but I'm not sure. But if it's a software or if it's something that requires less money and shorter processes, that's something that we will consider.
I will try to take a different angle because it probably will be the same answer. So first of all, I also believe there is no like a real dual use. Maybe even the opposite. What we did in the past in the garage, that we used to look at companies, startups that work in agri-tech or in pharma or in medical and try to do some kind of a pivot or shifting them into the defense sector, and it was quite amazing to succeed with this kind of stuff. The other thing is that we mainly work very closely with the end customer. For me, as a reserve duty in the Shabak, or with our friends in the Mossad, or even with the special units in the IDF, it's very easy when the end customer said, listen, this is what we need, and you try to find the right solution, the right tech, the right team, and the right startup to work with. But you have to figure out that in the end customer in Israel is great, and the beta site in Israel is amazing, but it has to be something that you can scale up outside of Israel and really go ahead with the technology.
Yeah, that's great. I want to touch on. I think it's me. Hello?
It will work.
Yes, maybe.
It's you.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about the dynamic between startups and corporates. Back to a point that Nimrod said, when you're evaluating a startup, you say that it seems more promising if they can compete with these larger corporates, something that we haven't seen before. We've seen in the past Lockheed and Boeing being the ones to provide the innovation. So on one hand, how has the sales cycle here changed for the startup now that they're able to win these deals over these larger corporates? How has it evolved in the last year since October 7? And how has collaboration, or why is the collaboration with these larger partners also something that's important for the startup to keep in mind?
I mean, defense has always been a technology-driven industry, right? So it's kind of in the last more than 100 years. And the defense primes or the traditional incumbents are really good at developing high-end technology. They have other problems, right? I mean, and it's not something I hope I'm kind of saying for the first time, but they're not great at processes, they're not great at efficiency, they have a hard time to bring certain types of talent, but they have other advantages which are amazing, mostly around kind of the ability to build for the long term, to build complex projects, and also they have a lot of access to sell. And for startups, it's really hard to compete. So I really agree with the point around kind of building the next gen helicopter or airplane, etc. And I think what is amazing to see in kind of what's happening in Israel for the past year and a half, right, since October 7, but it started a bit earlier, is that Mafat mostly is kind of leading that. They understand that they need to, on the one hand, collaborate with startups and make room for innovation and kind of bring them on board, let them enjoy the benefits of working from within the system, but on the other hand, not suffocate innovation. Because there has been a lot of kind of defense tech startups over the years that were really amazing, but they were mostly kind of science projects that were acquired at a relatively early stage because they started working with the traditional players. So what we would like to see as kind of generalist VC that wants to, put a significant check in the company and hope to build eventually from a financial standpoint a multi-million-dollar company on the revenue side, we want to make sure that they will have the platform to accelerate through the collaboration on the one hand, but not suffocate or have too harsh kind of strings in the contract. And I think there is still some work to do around that.
I think the industry is changing dramatically. And to look back at how it was and try to realize how it's going to be in the future, that's not the right way to do with that industry. For example, I think that 5 or 10 years ago, there is no way Israeli startup around defense tech could have become like a real company. And it's a bit like banks. I mean, can you imagine 10 or 15 years ago a startup work with banks? I mean, it sounded like something that can happen, but or an Israeli startup working with the Shabak or Israeli startup working with Mafat, like 5 or 10 years ago, it sounded like something that can't be real. And you see more and more of those governments and even corporates and so on realize that they need to do something different. They can't, if they want to adapt new technologies and innovation and so on, they can't stay only like with the inner development or only with those large corporates of the Elbit, Rafael, Tasiya, Avirit, and others, and they need to open and they need to work differently. And I'm happy to see that happening in Israel with the Shabak and Mafat and others. And I'm sure all over the world it's pretty much the same because they just have to. So the industry is evolving, and I think that things that are happening right now are really changing the way startups can become like massive companies around defense tech.
I think startups in defense have a huge opportunity to make this industry disruptive. And they're changing the way the prime look at them, making really huge changes. I saw something amazing today that if you talk about Palantir, for example, like 10 years ago, almost no one knew Palantir. The valuation of Palantir now in the stock market is bigger than Lockheed Martin. It's unbelievable. And if you're talking about Anduril 5 years ago, not 10 years ago, almost no one knew, and now it's an amazing company. And I believe that some of the startups in the defense sector that are starting now will go wild in 5 or 10 years. Really amazing stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree. So when these startups are going through these sales cycles and competing with these corporates, they can move much faster. But the sales cycle in Malasot, it's still long and it takes time. So how does the length of the sales cycle or the complexity of the procurement process with governments impact your investment decisions? Are you able to make less investments in the same amount of time? Things like that.
So we're focused on Israel or kind of Israeli-related founders, right? That's our mandate. And like everyone are talking about defense tech, but like the deal flow, the amount of like new startups that are being founded in this sector in Israel is not huge. So like there is a lot of kind of, I wouldn't say noise, but kind of positive noise in the sense that like there needs to be room for this ecosystem, but we're still not there. So us as a generalist fund that looks at defense, but also looks at other opportunities, we're kind of a second derivative of the amount of founders that are building, right? So first of all, we would probably in the near future, won't do a lot of new investments in defense tech companies. We're looking for those, really special teams that are looking to build multi-billion-dollar companies and disrupt the industry in certain ways. It's a very challenging industry. And I think it's also worth mentioning that in terms of kind of geographies, unlike the traditional tech industry, it's a very geographically focused industry. We have amazing successes, but most of them are in the US. And in the US, there's also like a lot of advantage to the US primes, which are probably the best in the world, right? So we're actually looking for companies that want to focus at other markets, probably European markets that are now kind of having this renaissance around investing their defense budget and increasing them around what's happening in that region. But on the other hand, they don't have the competition, both from startups, but also from kind of the European primes, which are a bit less effective than the US primes. So I think, to kind of put a long story short, what we would like to see in terms of the sales cycle is focus. And that also kind of brings me to the title of this panel. I mean, it's called Julius, but I personally think like defense first is the way to go. You need to be as focused as possible on the use case, on the buyer, on the user, on the geography, who's your competition directly, what products they have, and if you can explain that, and you don't need to build a product, you don't need to write one line of code, you don't need to manufacture anything, at least for us to make an investment, you just need to tell a compelling story and bring some evidence that what you're saying is possible, and think big. So in terms of sales cycle, I think that once you have that focus, combined with what's happening with what you mentioned, the openness of governments and security agencies around the world, but also in Europe, to work with startups directly, this trend will lead to shorter sales cycles, more effective kind of traction building, and eventually it will be easier to kind of be ready for the next funding round within kind of the set time frame. So it doesn't have to be 5 years, it can be shorter.
Actually, I want to ask you a little bit of a different angle here, because you've been investing in the space for 6 years now, right? So you've seen a lot of companies. You're very much experienced in it. It's not something new for Tau Ventures. So when we're looking at the exit landscape, as investors, obviously, we're only going to do a deal if we have a path to exit, and if we are confident that we're going to get the returns that we're aiming for. So in defense, we don't yet have those typical acquirers. What do you think about that? How is that going to evolve in the coming few years too?
So it's pretty much same answer for a different question, because again, I don't think that what was relevant in the past years is relevant now. So yeah, there are no large exits in that field currently, but things were totally different. And I think the fact there is tons of money around from governments and armies and agencies and so on, and huge corporates and so on, and there is basically everyone running fast in order to get those new technologies. So we'll see more and more exits. So I'm not sure, and again, it's pretty much similar to revolutions in other fields. So I'm not sure that those companies that starts today, in 5 years, they're gonna be unicorns. But first, maybe we'll see more and more acquisitions around $200, $300, $400 million and so on, and that will somehow be a success for Israeli defense tech companies.
And who do you see as the potential acquirers or buyers of the companies? Is it the
So it's not governments, obviously, I guess so, maybe the Chinese or so, but basically it's not that type of, it's more like large corporates that we see that have tons of money, and they're looking for somehow to create advantage compared to their competitors with new technologies, and they cannot, or it's going to take them a while to develop it in-house, again, same as other fields. So that's how I see it. I expect in the next, 3 to 5 years to see exits in hundreds of millions or so. And then later on, when this industry will be more mature, we'll see IPOs, we'll see companies like standalone companies of billions of dollars and so on, but it's going to take some time.
Another question, different question,
Different
same question?
Want to add something on that? So I think our view is a bit different in the sense that we're a relatively big fund, and we're looking for those, $1 billion exits. Basically, our strategy is to invest between 25 to 30 companies in a fund, where 4 companies, each one will have the potential or will basically return the whole fund. And in defense tech, we really believe that, like you say, the future will be different than the past, and we will see amazing value creation. And we're already seeing that. We're seeing, obviously Anduril that everyone are talking about, but also Saronic and Helsing and a bunch of other companies that have built a lot of value within 3, 4, 5 years. And a lot of it is happening in the US, but some in Europe, and we believe that Israel is an amazing place to do that. And the second point around exit, so we actually just now had a $4.1 billion exit of a company that was founded in 2019. They're called Blue Halo. It's a defense tech company. Yeah, I mean, they've built a lot of revenue. So they had like $1 billion of revenue, but that's exactly the point. Once you move from the pilot stage to kind of winning a program with one of the agencies, the ACV is huge. It's like hundreds of millions of dollars of ACV in one contract. And that's what we're kind of betting on, and that's why we, as a generalist fund that haven't done a lot of defense tech in the past, believe that the opportunity to build a significant company from Israel is now.
Amazing, thank you. Naor, last question. For a new founder that's looking to establish a startup today, what would be your one tip for them to see success? You can also take this from the investor point of view. For someone who's looking to get into it from an investment point of view, what would be your one tip?
So be bold, go wild, and don't listen to people like us saying what you need to do.
Amazing, thank you very much.